Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting, this special meeting of the Rochester City Council. The meeting will come to order and the clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Evans,
Present.
Councilmember Gruber,
Here.
Councilmember Harris,
Here.
Councilmember Lupian,
Here.
Councilmember Melendez,
Here.
Councilmember Patterson,
Here.
Councilmember Pio. Councilmember Pio. Vice President Lightfoot,
Present, ma'am.
and President Scott.
Here. Councilmember Evans, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
States
America
of America,
and to the republic
Republic,
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if we could pause for just a moment, for a moment of silence to recognize the tragedies that have been occurring throughout our country in the last several weeks. Thank you. Before we start, I want to take a moment to thank everyone who has made themselves available for this meeting. Today, we're here to consider a resolution relating to the Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Plan for the City of Rochester, pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 203, which requires each local government with a police force in New York State to adopt a policing reform plan by April 1st, 2021. The mayor and I have submitted a statement of necessity related to introductory number 116 to that effect. Introductory number 116 is a resolution endorsing emergency action to ratify and adopt a reform and reinvention collaborative plan for the city of Rochester. Before we move on to questions and comments, I would like to formally introduce this resolution for consideration. May I have a motion to introduce introductory number 116?
Yes, Madam President, I move to introduce introductory number 116, resolution ratifying and adopting a police reform and reinvention collaborative plan for the city of Rochester.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Madam President, I second that motion.
Thank you. Now on to our questions and comments, and I'm sure that we all have something to say. And I'd like to start by, again, offering my thanks to those who are here and to those who helped to put this, this plan together. I'm sure that it required an extensive amount of work and planning and collaboration and all of that. I know that on our side, on the council side, we put in some really arduous hours going through it in a very short time frame and making adjustments and amendments, which is why which was actually the guidance we received from the mayor when she handed it over to us, saying, it's yours, do what you need to do with it, which is what we did. And I must say that we were more than confused and a bit dismayed by having gotten the comments back, which even now getting the explanation of why we got them, they were not substantive. And given the amount of time that we devoted to doing that and the considerations that were taken, I am disappointed that there was a need to make those particular changes that we're now being asked to vote on. Now, I know that they're not significant, they're not substantive. It's just sort of a matter of, almost a matter of principle, having had those changes made because someone didn't like the writing style, for example. But we know that this is a plan. And other than the stuff that was written in stone in Bible days, stuff can be amended. We also know that we don't have the option of not approving a plan is not an option, because we do not want to make our city ineligible for receiving state funding for police services. So with that, I would open the floor for any additional comments and or concerns.
Yes, Madam President.
Yes, Vice President Lightfoot.
Thank you to the citizens of Rochester, to the mayor, the deputy mayor, and all of my colleagues in your respective places. I just rise to make a comment of explaining my vote to vote for Executive 203. I've spent quite a few months along with my colleague Miguel Melendez on the committee for drafting Executive 203. I would say that process was it was tough process, just as it was with us trying to go over it, because it's a very extensive document. I want to thank Doreen Kirkmeyer for trying to rally the troops, if you would, to corral us to try to have some focus on Executive 203, which is a very broad brush, if you would, just to say the least. However, we did narrow it down to a certain amount of about, I believe, 8 or 9 areas in which we attempted to try to address this policing reform effort. Quite a few folks were represented at that table for that working group. UCLM, a member from the Race Commission, a couple of members from City Council, the police chief, the mayor and her administration. And I felt that process, and the members of the Police Accountability Board, I felt that process was respectful of all of those individuals, being that they were there at that table. They were able to submit their reports, and there were other reports that were also attached to the original draft of Executive 203 that was presented to this community at large for well over a month, that the community had to weigh in and give input on this particular Executive 203. There were town hall meetings and extensive other meetings, considering that we're under COVID-19 and a lot of the restrictions due to COVID-19. We really had to be kind of different ways of approaching the community for their input due to COVID-19. However, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people on the telephone call and many other virtual town hall meetings that were had. And some of us did our own stuff. I did my own piece with the Barbers and Beauticians. I think Councilman Lupien did some of her pieces with her, groups and individuals that she knows. And we were all asked to go out into our individual communities and do our best due diligence to try to do as best as we could to address this. The Race Commission report came out, and then that got added to it. So, when I look at the entire process, of course, I would have loved to have had more time. Absolutely. I would have loved to have had more time with this document. However, we were under the extreme schedule of getting this done before April 1st due to the executive order. I would remind people, as Madam President has said, that it was stated that municipalities who did not complete this in time, some of their state funding could be in jeopardy. That doesn't mean we put out a bad product. However, we're on schedule to try to meet that time constraint. With that being said, we then in turn were giving this information in this document by the administration. We spent, I think that might have been, it reminded me of my county legislature days when we would be up at 11 to 12 o'clock at night and we have to vote to stay a little longer. That was the first time on city council that we've ever had such a meeting. I think we all had a lot of coffee that night. And we really took a good stab. And I would agree with Madam President that I was a little taken back as well as some of the minute changes that were made, in my opinion, that were somewhat disrespectful to some degree, being that we were told to do what we will with this document. However, with that being said, I personally don't believe that they were extensive enough that I would vote no to move forward in progressing to, one, not lose our state funding, two, disrespecting all of those comments and all of the public input and all of the individuals who had say in this executive order, which many of that stuff made it into this plan. Not all of it, of course, but many of it did. Citizens' input, organizational input, a lot of it made it into this plan. So I would feel that that would be a disrespect to the time and effort of all of those individuals who did have that input and was able to get that forward. So I'm not totally, totally proud of this thing. I know we can do better, but I want to remind the citizens that this is not the end all to police reform in the city of Rochester. This is to meet the governor's executive order. Now, don't get me wrong, we got to do everything within this plan and then some and more, but it should not be looked at as the end all. There's the race report, there's this executive order that we have, but also there's some policy, practices, and procedures that we're asking, and this city council has asked the police chief and administration to look at on their own, that does not take changing of state law, that does not take changing of city council to make law. But some of these things can be done internally that we need to do around policing and policing reform. So I would say, and I would add that we as a body can always put forth resolutions and or laws that we can put forth to move the needle even further when it comes to policing reform in our community. So I say that, Madam President, I thank you for the time to say that I want to thank all of the citizens, all of the organizations, and all of the people who took their time out to add their input and to see this process forward so that we can meet the governor's executive order. And we have some things in here that I think are very helpful in us moving police and community reform, putting some accountability with the dates and things that we've put in here, timelines that we put in here, and we can revisit some of these. I look at the number we put out for 500, reducing our officers. We got to understand, where does that number come from? What the data is behind some of this information. We have to make sure that we have the proper data, just like we did last year, before we didn't reduce the police class, recruit class by 100%. We reduced it by 50% because we didn't have the data at the time that would support that, right? So we needed a plan so that we have to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions so that we could be governing properly with the citizens and being fiduciarily responsible for the citizens' dollars. So I would ask and encourage the rest of my colleagues to look at that as to say, this is not the end all, but let's make sure that we have the proper data before we dive in. We don't want to be Minneapolis, who made very big decisions, decreased their department by almost a third, and then within a year or two had to turn around and redo the things that they did because they moved in haste or by emotions. And so I would say, make sure that we're making our decisions based on the data and not based on emotions and based on the feelings that we feel may be due to the feelings that we know a lot of the community may be feeling towards policing. So with that being said, Madam President, I am going to support this with the fact and the notion that we can revisit these things next year. Our budget cycles every year. We can revisit some of these things, have accountability for some of the things we put forth, and we can make additional moves as we have more information and more data, and as we see some of the things that are implemented in the plan that we currently already have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have a note from Councilmember Lupien who indicates she'd like to make a motion to amend. And I did get some guidance on the process. Do we have someone from Corporation Counsel?
Yeah, I think I have to say I move to amend the motion on the floor.
You think what?
I think in Robert's rules, you say I move to amend the motion on the floor and it requires a second.
Before we do that, I wanted to get the guidance on that. And Tom?
Yes.
I know that we did here. If you would
Mr. President Scott.
clarify that, please.
With regard to introducing an amendment to a resolution, any council member can do so as long as they put it in writing and present it to the other members of the council. With regard to the issue of whether the resolution could entail amending the police reform plan, our research indicates we can't do that, the executive order states that the plan is supposed to go through the process that Councilmember Lightfoot outlined, and that once it does, it goes for up and down vote from the members of council. And I've provided to the members of the council highlighted the provisions of the executive order that I think say that.
Yeah, I definitely disagree with that interpretation.
Can't hear you. Your sound is breaking up.
You got robot voice, Mary.
Got no voice
Is
now.
that any better?
That's-
Is that better?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I was just gonna say, I disagree with that interpretation, and as does our council. From what I understand, Linda did not agree with that. Is that true?
No, she did. She said it essentially means we get to vote it up or down.
Well, I do have an amendment to the actual resolution itself, but I would like to at least, if this council isn't willing to vote on those amendments to the actual plan, I'd at least like to articulate them. But from what you're saying, Tom, I can make a motion to amend the resolution.
Sorry. Yes, you can.
Okay.
The resolution or the legislation?
Well, I have amendments to both, but I at least have one for the resolution.
Yeah, so you can amend the resolution as long as it doesn't entail amending the plan.
Okay. So I make a movement to amend the resolution on the floor. And that needs a second.
So what has to come to council in writing?
So I put it in the chat. Does that count?
No.
I'm not asking you, Mr. Patterson, Councilmember Patterson.
Go ahead and ask the lawyer, but how is it a formal
It's in-
notification through chat?
It's in writing, is it not?
It is not a formal notification through chat. It needs to be available for a public review. Public review is not available through chat. But go ahead, Mr. Lawyer.
This is really an unprecedented one. The rules do not say that it has to be pre-published to the public. It does, very minimalistic rules they are to say just that it has to be in writing. Should not be voted on until the text of the amendment is presented to the council members in writing.
Which I have done.
So why not send it out as an email to everyone? That way it is foilable in the future. Chat is not.
I will do that, but if you would like me to take a minute right now to do that, I can. But I will say this has all been very hasty. So doing the best that I can. There you go. Foil away. So make a movement to amend. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. So my amendment to the resolution is in section 2, striking out the words "and a certification affirming that the said plan has been developed and is submitted in compliance with the order." It is my understanding that the open meetings that were stipulated by the executive order guidance, as well as the makeup of who was making the, who was giving input to the plan, was not followed. And I don't feel comfortable voting on this plan, putting my name on something that I don't believe to be true. So now I believe it goes to it would take a majority vote. Is that right?
Okay, are you proposing that be removed?
Yes.
So if it's removed, then our plan is not accepted. It's not acceptable.
It's necessary to submit the certification. That's part of the governor's order. I have reviewed as part of preparing the resolution and legislation, the record of the preparation of the plan. And it does comply with the executive order. And there's been no indications if open meetings law were applicable even, that there was any violation of open meetings law or other procedural laws.
Well, it did say that the deliberation meeting should be
Your sound is gone again.
Is that any better?
A little bit. A little more.
So, I mean, we don't need to go back and forth over whether or not, because I think we've been there already, that the meetings were open in accordance to the guidance. So, whether or not this is required for the executive order, I'm putting my amendment out there and it's up for you all to vote on.
Okay, before we call the vote, are there comments?
I would request a roll call vote.
And I would add also that we need to be sure that removing this certification would not make our plan not in compliance and therefore not meeting the April 1st guideline. And that's a mighty big risk. So I would put that out there as a matter of consideration. I also would offer as an alternative approach is to submit sort of like a minority opinion or something that states the concern about the way the process was handled, as opposed to totally just sort of violating the whole document. That's what I would like to have people consider before they vote. Are there any additional questions or comments on this motion?
I mean, I do, President Scott, I do have comments to make on the actual plan. I know Councilmember Melendez was even before me in line as well.
I don't have that.
But I presume that
Oh, there we go. Okay.
We're voting.
Point of order, can we deal with the motion first and then go back to the plan? Because I also have comments on the plan itself, but if we can dispense with the motion that's on the floor and then get back to whatever business.
All right, all in favor of the motion, and do I need to read it? If not, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Councilmember Gruber,
Sorry, President Scott, I want to be clear. We are voting on Councilmember Lupien's amendment right now.
Yes.
Okay. No.
Councilmember Harris,
No.
Councilmember Lupien,
Yes.
Councilmember Melendez,
Oh,
Councilmember Patterson,
No.
Vice President Lightfoot,
No.
President Scott.
No. Motion does not carry or record the vote. 7.
The vote is 2-6, non-affirmative. So
Thank
the
you.
deputy city clerk will enter the non-affirmative vote of 2-6 into the record.
Okay.
Thank you. And I appreciate you guys entertaining that motion and out of our standard protocol. But I did want to articulate the other ones because I know that we're referencing them, and just to be really clear with the public. What was taken out of the plan that I was hoping to put back in with a motion to amend was to create a clear timeline and plan for immediately reducing the RPD staff to 500 to 550 officers while investing in alternate response methods and violence prevention efforts. In section GA3D, striking the words, the PAB is an entity of City Council and any resources and funds provided to the will be considered through City Council's budget process, and adding back in, support the PAB in its necessary work as outlined by the city charter. And then section J4, in reference to pretextual stops, striking the word transform and replacing it with end. Thank you.
Thank you. There are additional comments on the item. Councilmember Gruber. I'm sorry, Councilmember Melendez.
That's okay. Thanks, Madam President. I just want to say that, you know, this was a very extensive and exhaustive process. I know that we have some work ahead of us still. You know, not everything that's made it into the final plan is everything everyone desired. But I do think that moving this plan forward will give us a great starting place. We have some deadlines that are in there. I think council did a great job of bringing some recommendations back into the document that was eliminated before. And we were able to bring some of, not all of, but some of the Race Commission recommendations into the document as well. I'm going to be voting in support of this. I wouldn't call this an A+ plan, but I certainly feel that this will be a plan that will help us move forward and identify additional recommendations in the future that we can potentially modify the plan or add to the plan. So with that, I'll cede the floor.
Councilmember Gruber.
Thanks, President Scott. This plan was an opportunity to reimagine public safety and rethink our approach to policing in the city of Rochester. That's literally what the executive order was called. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and hundreds, if not thousands of hours of community members' time. And I want to thank everyone who stepped forward and shared their vision, and I want to respect their efforts, including some incredible work by council staff, incredible work by staff members in the administration as well. This plan, I think anyone who reads this plan would recognize that it does not read like a roadmap that gets us to where we need to be as a community. Frankly, I want us to stop letting big community-wide opportunities for change pass us by. And while this resolution is non-binding and in some ways its result is only symbolic, one of the key pieces that Councilmember Lupien just wrote about, one of the key or several of the key pieces only came back to us with any level of response from administration about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes ago. And although I respect your Councilmember Lupien's amendment, a lot of that was about the process in terms of open meetings law and a lot of things that Tom referenced. So although I ultimately did not vote for Councilmember Lupien's amendment, I am in fact going to vote no on this plan. It's for reasons of both process and substance that I cannot support it in its current form. Thankfully, most importantly, we have another opportunity to go further. When the administration prevents the 2022 budget, I would ask them to go beyond the target set in this plan for right-sizing our police department's budget and personnel. And I'd ask them to ensure that every mechanism for police accountability is fully supported. I'm voting no, but also want to highlight what a lot of my colleagues stated before. Appreciate people's work on this, recognize that it came a long way from where it started, and know that we have an opportunity to really get this thing right in less than 2 months when we see the budget. Thank you.
Madam President?
Councilmember Evans.
Yeah, Madam President, I want to echo your comments that you made earlier about council being told that we had the opportunity to amend the plan as we see fit, which we did over a long period of hours. And when I ended our last session, I counted 8 votes in favor of this plan. And then all of a sudden, at the last minute, we saw that there were changes that were made, be they minor or not minor, are immaterial. In partnerships, you have to work together, talk together, and then we can't look to hash things out a couple of minutes before the meeting. So for me, I find that unacceptable. I'm not happy about it, especially after all the hours council members spent looking over this plan, particularly last Monday night when by my count, we were in session for over 5 hours. So I have a problem with that. That's not the way I want things to go going forward. We have a lot of other things that we have to work on. And if we agree to something, I want to make sure that we agree to it. And if not, let's have the conversation prior to a meeting that's taking place in less than 24 hours. So for that reason, I'm voting no on this.
Additional comments? If there are no further comments, I would call for the vote. We'll do a roll call vote, please. All in favor?
Councilmember Evans,
No.
Councilmember Gruber,
No.
Councilmember Harris,
Yes.
Councilmember Lupian,
No.
Councilmember Melendez,
Yes.
Councilmember Patterson,
Yes.
Vice President Lightfoot,
Yes, ma'am.
President Scott.
Yes.
So the vote is 5-3 on the affirmative side. The deputy city clerk will enter the affirmative vote of 5-3 into the record.
That concludes the business for today. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here and for the efforts of all involved. A lot went into this, and I know we've got a lot riding on it. So again, thank you all and have